Thank you. That concludes general questions. Before we move to First Minister's question time, I invite members to join me in welcoming to the gallery the Honourable Om Birla, Speaker of the Lok Sabha Parliament of India. Thank you. We move to First Minister's questions, and at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. John Swinney said this week that if his budget doesn't pass, we are playing right into the hands of Elon Musk. Yes, you heard that right. So the SNP's budget will cause misery to hard-working Scots and struggling businesses. But in the mind of Scotland's populist First Minister, that's a price we all must pay to defeat the shadowy forces of populism. Was it John Swinney's New Year's resolution to distract from his failings by making ludicrous claims such as this?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I can see the shadowy face of populism right in front of me just now. I would say, Presiding Officer, that a budget that protects business from a challenging trading environment, that delivers a real terms increase in local government funding, that invests to reform and improve the National Health Service, that gives a huge boost to housing investment, that takes steps to eradicate child poverty and invests in a clean green transition for the Scottish economy and the environment is a budget worth supporting, and Mr Finlay should come to his senses and vote for the government's budget.
So Finlay.
It's really something to hear John Swinney, of all people, preaching against populism. The leader of Scotland's populist party, the party of blaming others, sowing division, fantasy promises of easy fixes.
Let's hear Mr Finlay.
John Swinney sounds like a serial arsonist suddenly warning people about the risk of fire. But despite his ridiculous rhetoric, his budget will pass because of the votes of Anas Sarwar's Labour. So I'd like to ask John Swinney what sweeteners he had to give to Labour in exchange, or did Anas Sarwar just hand him a blank cheque?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, my speech on Monday was designed to set out the very serious issues that face Scotland if the budget doesn't pass. And therefore, we need to have cool heads and a clear process to go through to secure agreement around the government's budget. Because without that, all that I said on Monday will come to pass if there is not agreement around the budget. Now, there's a process underway within the Scottish Parliament to agree that, and we're engaged in constructive discussions with all parties. I made clear on Tuesday that despite the comments that Mr Sarwar made on radio on Tuesday, I do not in any way take for granted the passage of the budget. That is why this government will fulfil under my direction the duty it has to do to engage constructively with all parties to secure a parliamentary majority and to make sure we can deliver progress for Scotland.
Russell Finlay.
Come on, who's he trying to kid? Labour have folded and the budget will pass. Everybody knows that. And he must be absolutely delighted at the weakness of Scottish Labour. This has been the cheapest budget deal in 26 years of devolution. And it's typical Labour helping the SNP, just as they did with Nicola Sturgeon's Gender Law and Humza Yousaf's Hate Crime Act. At least, though, this does mean that John Swinney won't have to strike any damaging deals with the Greens, as he's done so often in the past. So can he now rule out any new taxes or extremist policies being demanded by the Greens?
First Minister.
Well, I've made clear, and the Finance Secretary made clear in the budget statement in December, that the government's tax proposals will not change from what's in the budget, and there will be no further tax changes from this government in advance of the 2026 elections. I hope that gives some tax certainty if Mr Finlay is genuinely seeking that clarity. And as for dialogue with other political parties, I want to come back to what I said in my previous answers. The government's door remains open to dialogue about the contents of the government's budget, because I want to have as much agreement as I possibly can construct in this Parliament supporting the budget measures, so that we can all work together, as we have a statutory duty to do, to eradicate child poverty in Scotland, and the support of any member willing to help the government in our efforts to eradicate child poverty will be welcomed by me.
Russell Finlay.
Well, I mean, the first part of John Swinney's answer sounded like bad news for Patrick Harvie, but the second part was a bit less clear, so we'll have to wait and see. And after almost 2 decades in power, John Swinney also said this week that he wants his budget to be, in a quote, a turning point. But what is it that he wants to turn away from? Is it all the times he demanded to break up the United Kingdom? Is it the ferries he wasted a fortune on? Is it the gender reforms that he backed? Yep. Is it the damage that he did to schools? Or is it Nicola Sturgeon's toxic legacy? John Swinney was the driving force behind every damaging SNP policy for the past 18 years. This budget is not a turning point. Isn't it just more of the same divisive, populist nonsense from John Swinney and the SNP?
First Minister.
I think the budget's touched a bit of a raw nerve for the Conservatives. So let me just tell Mr Finlay a few things about the government's budget. Save the Children encouraged all political parties in the Scottish Parliament to support the budget so children can benefit from the positive steps taken. The Scottish Retail Consortium, whilst the proposed Scottish budget is far from perfect, there is...
Let's hear the First Minister.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that again, so that the Conservatives can properly hear what the voice of business is telling us about this budget. Whilst the proposed Scottish budget is far from perfect and has flaws, there is much in it that retailers can get behind. Our hope is that ministers, and Rachel Hamilton's now laughing at the voice of business within our Parliament. That's where the Conservative Party has now descended to. Our hope is that ministers... Let's
hear the First Minister.
Our hope is that ministers and MSPs can work collegiately to pass the budget. And in addition to that, Shelter Scotland welcoming the government's investment in affordable housing, and local government indicating that the budget represents a strong investment package. So there we have it. Child poverty organisations, business, local government and the housing sector in Scotland demonstrating this is a budget for unity in Scotland, and it's not a surprise that the populist Conservatives are having nothing to do with it.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In October, I warned of a winter crisis brewing in our NHS. But instead of taking action to deliver a plan to keep patients and staff safe, the SNP buried their head in the sand. And the result? Deadly chaos. Over Christmas, 1,642 people waited over 12 hours in A&E. Ambulances were put on red alert, a flu wave piled even more pressure on our hospitals, and thousands of people waited hours to even get their call answered by NHS 24. Dr Ian Kennedy of the BMA said, "The NHS as we know it will struggle to see out another year." This is the deadly consequence of John Swinney plunging our NHS into a permanent crisis. And isn't this the clearest sign that the SNP is taking Scotland in the wrong direction?
First Minister.
So the first thing I want to acknowledge is that the National Health Service has been under the most acute pressure in the course of the last few weeks. And we saw that rising in December with the emergence of flu cases, which resulted in very high demand on hospital services. Hospital admissions as a result of flu nearly doubled from 708 in the week ending the 15th of December to 1,382 in the week ending the 22nd of December, and then rose further to 1,596 in the week ending the 29th of December. Now, these statistics are an indication of the severity of the crisis that we have seen with flu in our country. Thankfully, hospital admissions have fallen by 36% in the week ending the 5th of January. But the number of hospital admissions in the week ending the 29th of December is the highest in any given week, as recorded by Public Health Scotland data going back to 2010. Now, I say that to explain the severity of the situation the National Health Service has dealt with, to express my thanks to the clinicians, the staff, the ambulance personnel, the NHS 24 staff, the general practitioners and everyone in the healthcare system who has given everything they could in the course of the last few weeks to address this situation. And what the Government has always recognised is there was a need to prepare for winter planning. We did that. The National Health Service, despite the enormous challenges, has withstood the pressures of the largest level of pressure since 2010, and I thank members of staff for everything they contributed to achieve that objective.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, our staff deserve praise, but they're being failed by this SNP government too. And it's people across Scotland that are living the consequences of SNP failure. Take the example of Robert, a retired policeman from Lanarkshire. He had to attend A&E at Wishaw over Christmas due to crippling abdominal pain. Due to a lack of beds, he was forced to lie on the floor in excruciating pain for 5.5 hours before he was eventually given morphine and oxycodone. A nurse told the family that it could be worse. One patient had been waiting more than 50 hours for a bed. On John Swinney's watch, Scots who have worked all their lives, like Robert, are forced to endure such painful, dangerous and humiliating circumstances. So doesn't Robert's distressed daughter sum it up best when she said, "My dad gave his all for others in his career, but now I'm genuinely scared that the next time something happens to him, he won't make it through because of the mess the SNP have allowed the NHS to get into." The SNP couldn't run a bath, let alone the NHS.
First Minister.
So I want to begin by expressing my apology to Robert and his family for the experience that he had in Wishaw General Hospital. I accept that the pressure on the National Health Service has made the treatment of individuals very challenging and very difficult, and people will have not had the type of experience they should have had in hospital care. And I acknowledge that, and I accept that, and I do make no attempt to deny it. Yep. But what I do have to say are two things. First of all, the level of demand and the pressure on the National Health Service has to be acknowledged, given the scale of the pressure we are facing as a consequence of the flu outbreak that we are dealing with. And secondly, that members of staff have gone out of their way to do everything they could, extending shifts, contributing more than could reasonably be asked of them to do their level best for patients. Now, I accept in some circumstances that will not be enough and will not have been good enough for individuals. But I think we have got to acknowledge those two issues that I put to Parliament. The demand has been colossal for the National Health Service, and in addition to that, staff have given their all to support individuals like Robert.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, there is no clearer sign the SNP is taking Scotland in the wrong direction than their woeful record on the NHS. We need faster access to GPs, but instead patients are forced to go to A&E, plunging it further into crisis. We need to tackle long waits for treatment, but under the SNP, nearly 1 in 6 Scots are stuck on a waiting list, with over 100,000 people waiting for over a year. We need to tackle the number of bed days lost to delayed discharge, but instead thousands of people are stuck in hospital, cleared to leave, but unable to get a care package. John Swinney has no plan, and his incompetence is risking the very existence of our NHS. So isn't it the case that a change of direction for our NHS can't come from John Swinney and the SNP, it can only come with a change of government in 2026?
First Minister.
Well, it's interesting that the people of Scotland were promised change by the Labour government in July. And what the people of Scotland have endured, if you're a WASPy woman, for example, is the Labour Party utterly reneging on its commitment to compensate WASPy women, And if you are a pensioner, what you have got from change from the Labour Party
Let's
is the
hear the First
removal
Minister.
of the winter fuel payment when temperatures in this country are plummeting. The Labour Party's promise of change is an absolute farce in front of the people of Scotland. So what this government will do is concentrate on its plans to invest in and reform the National Health Service by ensuring that the measures within the budget are supported to improve the quality of care for people in Scotland, so that we have an expansion of frailty units to strengthen our A&E capacity, that we can expand hospital at home, which has been a huge asset to us in dealing with the winter pressures, so that we can support general practice with an extra £13.6 million, that we can strengthen the investment in preventative measures to ensure that people are able to follow the advice which many people did to get the right care in the right place in advance of the winter pressures that we have faced. Now, all of that is contained within the Scottish Government's budget, and I'm delighted that the Labour Party looks as if it has at last come to its senses and realised that this is a budget that has got strong measures to support people in Scotland. But Mr Sarwar needs to get off the fence. It's time for Mr Sarwar to vote in favour of lifting the two-child limit. It's time for Mr Sarwar to vote to reintroduce
Briefly, First Minister.
For pensions. It's time for Mr Sarwar to get off the fence and back the government's budget.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I remind the Chamber that before being elected to this Parliament, I worked for 8 years for the children's charity Abelara. To ask the First Minister when the Cabinet will next meet.
First Minister.
The Cabinet will next meet on Tuesday.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, before politics, I was a youth worker, and I vividly remember the first time I saw a medical device known as a tummy tub. They are essentially buckets filled with body temperature water, which simulate the womb in order to comfort babies going through withdrawal. It's needed because they are born addicted to drugs. Since 2017, at least 1,500 babies have been born with neonatal abstinence syndrome, showing signs of drug addiction like uncontrollable trembling, hyperactivity, distressed crying. Abelara want to open more residential beds for mothers and babies, new, intensive perinatal services. But as things stand, all of the funding for this ends next March. Does the First Minister agree that these interventions require more government money and more certainty, because Scotland desperately needs world-leading drug services, because we need to stop people dying, and because we need to do more to help these babies who spend the first days of their lives addicted to drugs?
First Minister.
So, sir, I obviously saw over the Christmas and New Year period the material that Mr Cole-Hamilton published on this important question, and I acknowledge the seriousness of the point that he puts to me. No newborn baby should be born dependent on substances, and mothers should be able to get the help they need, free from judgment and stigma. That principle underpins the government's approach to tackling drugs issues within our society, and more will be announced on that and demonstrated about that in the course of the next few days. I welcome the points that Mr Cole-Hamilton has put to me today, and these are obviously issues that we can discuss further to determine what assistance the government and in its financial provisions can be made to honour the commitment that I have made there, that no newborn baby should be born with any form of dependence on substances. And I'm very happy to discuss these issues with Mr Cole-Hamilton. I'm sure the Health Secretary will be able to take these discussions forward, and we commit to addressing the legitimate points that he's put to me today.
Question number 4, Claire Hawley.
To ask the First Minister, in light of recent freezing temperatures, whether he will provide an update on what steps the Scottish Government is taking to support low-income households with their energy bills.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, this winter we are forecasted to invest over £65 million in our 3 winter heating benefits, which will provide vital support to over 630,000 people with their energy bills. Additionally, we have increased investment in our Warmer Homes Scotland scheme by a further £20 million, taking the total investment this financial year to £85 million. This will help around 1,500 additional households to save an average of £400 per year each on their heating bills, helping to tackle fuel poverty. We've also invested an additional £20 million in the Scottish Welfare Fund this winter, of which there is no national equivalent available elsewhere in the United Kingdom, to enable councils to provide more vital support to people in crisis this winter.
Blair Haughey.
The Labour UK government promised change. They promised to cut energy bills by £300. Instead, we have seen not one but two energy price hikes, an increase in fuel bills of £470 since they came to power. And this is on top of a cost of living crisis caused primarily by Westminster policies. And shamefully, they removed the winter fuel payment from millions of pensioners with no warning pre-election of their plans. Over and above helping directly with energy costs by restoring universal support next winter, can the First Minister outline what steps this SNP government are taking to bolster low-income household budgets?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, we're committing over £3 billion this year to policies which tackle poverty and protect people as far as possible during the ongoing cost of living crisis. This is an essential commitment of the Government's work, and this year alone we're spending £154 million on activities to mitigate UK Government policies through schemes such as the discretionary housing payments and the Scottish Welfare Fund, which provide vital support to households. Now, of course, we might have had an expectation in the supposed agenda of change from a Labour government that many of these issues that we were mitigating because of the callousness of the Conservative government would have been removed by a Labour government. But they've just been carried on by the Labour government, and indeed on winter fuel payments they've been made worse. So what people in Scotland will realise, it's a Scottish Government, an SNP government, that will act to protect people that face difficulty, and they will not get that support from a Labour government.
Jeremy Balfour.
Presiding Officer, pensioners across Scotland have faced freezing temperatures this winter and will continue to do so over the coming weeks. The SNP are trying to shamelessly hoodwink pensioners by pretending they brought back the full payment for next year when we have not done this. It is only the Conservatives who provided the full winter payment to
Let's hear
pensioners,
Mr Balfour.
not the SNP and not Labour. First Minister, do you accept that both the SNP government and the Labour government have let thousands of pensioners go cold this winter rather than provide the support that they deserve and require?
First Minister.
Well, here we have it. A member of the Conservative Party, whose front bench wants me to cut public expenditure by £1 billion to afford a tax cut, wants me to spend more money on winter fuel payments. That's what's been put out to us today. £1 billion of a spending cut from the front bench, £155 million demanded of expenditure from the back benches. There is absolutely not a scrap of cohesion from the nonsense that comes from the Conservative Party.
Let's hear the First Minister.
And as things stand just now, it appears to me that the people who are most likely to vote against the Government's budget that will include provisions to restore a winter fuel payment removed by... Oh, now Mr Hoy's shouting at me, not this year. Well, I'm saying to Mr Hoy that Parliament faces a vote in about 6 or 7 weeks' time on the budget, which will include a winter fuel payment for all pensioner households in 25-26. Now, are the Conservatives going to vote for that? Are they going to do it? They want a winter fuel payment, but in a few weeks... The Conservatives are going to have a choice.
Let's hear the First Minister.
In 6 weeks' time, are the Conservatives going to vote against a winter fuel payment for pensioners, or are they not? From all I can say...
First Minister. I think it's fair to say that we're probably all having difficulty hearing the only person who has been called to speak. So let's treat one another with courtesy and respect. First Minister.
From what I can deduce, the Conservatives are going to turn their back on pensioners in Scotland in 6 weeks' time. And what pensioners in Scotland can rely on is the Scottish National Party government.
Question number 5, Liz Smith.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is regarding the latest reported concerns on the use of Hikvision CCTV devices by local authorities in Scotland.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, we are aware that there are CCTV cameras across local authorities which could be designed by or include Hikvision components. Any decision on security cameras in local authorities is for councils to make. While local authorities may choose to follow the lead of the Scottish Government, where we have decommissioned all Hikvision cameras in the Scottish Government estate, they are under no obligation or duty to do so. We encourage all organisations to follow National Cyber Security Centre supply chain security guidance when selecting a technology supplier. This guidance clearly sets out the security standards that suppliers should meet and the considerations that organisations should be making during the procurement process.
Liz Smith.
Thank you for that. The First Minister is very well aware of previous concerns, and including within the Scottish Government itself, about Hikvision technology being used for Chinese state surveillance, including in detention camps in Xinjiang. And the fact that because of Chinese intelligence law, companies such as Hikvision can be compelled to hand that over to the Chinese government. As a result of that, 3 of our local authorities, including Stirling in my region, confirmed that they wouldn't use Hikvision CCTV anywhere in their local authority. But that is not the case for the majority, or is it the case for Police Scotland, who make use of these cameras, and therefore that's got concern for public spaces, including schools. So if ministers are to adhere to the advice of the Biometrics Commissioner that due diligence is absolutely essential about the current use of Chinese Hikvision technology in Scotland, will the First Minister outline what decommissioning has taken place of Hikvision cameras and what remains on the public position? Because there is a question about full public transparency here, and I'd be grateful if the First Minister could clarify that.
First Minister.
As I indicated in my earlier answer, the Scottish Government decommissioned all Hikvision cameras across its estate last year. Now, Liz Smith asks me for a further audit of that activity, and she'll appreciate that I certainly can explore that issue in relation to Scottish Government activity, but my ability to explore that in independent organisations such as local authorities, I suspect that power does not exist for me to compel, but I could invite. But I will take away the points that Liz Smith has raised with me and explore whether there is more the Government can do to perhaps align better the activities of all public authorities in Scotland to address the legitimate points that have been accepted by the Scottish Government and which Liz Smith puts to me today.
Question number 6, Maggie Chapman.
To ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on the effectiveness of the National Planning Framework 4 principles in creating sustainable places across Scotland that enhance human and environmental well-being.
First Minister.
The National Planning Framework 4, published in February 2023, was a turning point for planning in Scotland. The Scottish Government has since monitored its impact, and the delivery programme was last updated in October 2024. It showed there has been positive progress in delivering NPF4 strategy, principles and national planning policies. Planning decisions are for local planning authorities in the first instance, and we continue to work with them on applying NPF4 policies in practice. Emerging local development plans will also reflect NPF4 in each part of Scotland. The Minister for Public Finance leads on this work with a sharp focus on improving planning authority capacity and performance. This is a key part of our response to the housing emergency, including ongoing work to unlock stalled sites for development.
Maggie Chapman.
Just before Christmas, the Scottish Government chose not to call in Aberdeen City Council's decision to approve plans to build on the last remaining green space in Torry, St Fittick's Community Park. There is no local consent for this development, but overwhelming local and national opposition. And SEPA has objected to the proposals too, on flooding grounds, something that's only going to worsen. Torry has already borne the brunt of an unjust energy transition, losing all Torry to oil and gas infrastructure. The incinerator and sewage works loom over the city. Torry has a life expectancy 10 years lower than the rest of the city. Tory should not lose its park to this corporate land grab. Can the First Minister explain to the people of Tory how the excellent principles in NPF4, designed to protect the well-being and build healthy futures for our communities, are being upheld in this case?
First Minister.
Sir, I would make a few points to Maggie Chapman. I understand the importance that she and the community attach to this question. But this is a live planning application which is resting with Aberdeen City Council, so I cannot comment in any specificity on that live planning application. I do know, however, in relation to my first answer, that the Aberdeen City Council will have to be mindful of the contents of National Planning Framework 4 in determining their decision on that application. So the point that Maggie Chapman puts to me is that NPF4 has an effect in the consideration of this application. The final point I would say is that I know that Ms Chapman wrote to the Minister for Public Finance on this issue, and he responded earlier this week pointing out that the assessment report relating to the notification to ministers on this subject is publicly available on the Government's website, and those issues can be considered within that context.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I know the First Minister will be aware of the work of the cross-party group in adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, having had regular and supportive engagement with the group in its previous roles. He will also likely be aware of recent work around the issue of mandatory reporting and a roundtable discussion on the matter held here in Parliament a couple of months back that I chaired in my position as convener of the group. There is clearly now a strong coalition of support for this measure from a broad range of survivor agencies and, crucially, survivors themselves here in Scotland. So can I ask the First Minister, in light of the news this week that the UK Government will now introduce mandatory reporting of child sexual abuse across professional bodies, what further considerations have the Scottish Government given to adopting this approach in Scotland?
Minister.
First of all, let me commend Mr McGregor on the leadership that he gives to the cross-party group on adult survivors of childhood abuse. And he's correct that I had a great deal of engagement with the group and with this area of policy in my previous roles within government. I take the issue of child abuse extremely seriously. It is abhorrent. And the Government has, of course, as is a matter of record, taken a number of actions, including the establishment of the inquiry that is led by Lady Smith to examine and confront all of these issues. The point that Mr McGregor makes to me about the importance of this issue being addressed by professionals is accepted absolutely by the Scottish Government. I want to be very clear that in Scotland today, professionals already have a professional duty to report child abuse. A practitioner's failure to report child abuse could constitute a breach of their employment contract, lead to disciplinary action or give rise to a claim for civil damages. Practitioners could also be struck off from social work, teaching or medical registers for gross misconduct. We are, however, considering the United Kingdom Government's proposed planned approach to mandatory reporting and will consider all relevant recommendations coming out of the independent Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry that I referred to in my earlier comments.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Devastated owners of RAC-affected homes in Aberdeen face being out of pocket, out of their homes and out of options when the council purchase at post-RAC valuation. Now, claims for compensation from the Tory RAC campaign group have seen the council point at this government, the local MP point at the UK government, and this government point at the council. So will the First Minister step in to help these residents, or will he too duck responsibility and point at someone else?
First Minister.
I think Mr Kerr will appreciate that these are complex issues which will be an interaction of private and public interests. The Minister for Housing has met with council leaders on this topic and has been in discussion with the City Council about these points, where the leadership of this question will be vested within the City Council. I am certainly happy to take away from Mr Kerr's point the issue that he raises with me as to whether there is more dialogue that would help to provide a solution to individuals. And I accept the distress and the uncertainty that this will be causing to members of the public. So I will ask the Housing Minister to look once again at these questions and determine if there is anything further the Government can do to try to assist dialogue in this respect.
Neil Johnson.
Yesterday, the National Autistic Society Scotland and the Autistic Knowledge Development published their report on Embrace Autism, a programme looking at the benefits of having post-diagnostic support for people receiving the assessment of having autism. The results were very positive. The numbers of people reporting that having no purpose in life fell from 1 in 4 to 1 in 10, and understandings of autism rose dramatically. Unfortunately, the current pathways, diagnosis is essentially an end point, whereas for people, it's a starting point of understanding autism. And yet in Scotland, while we know that there were 9,700 people in 2019 in England and Wales awaiting assessment, rising to 78,000, we don't have comparable numbers in Scotland. So can I ask the First Minister, does he agree that we need to look at putting into place post-diagnostic support for people receiving an assessment? But before we do that, can we at least have accurate numbers on those waiting assessment for autism and indeed ADHD? And I remind the Chamber of my own diagnosis.
First Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr Johnson for his question and accept the importance of the points that he puts to me. I read the report yesterday, and obviously the weakness in data is a matter of concern, so let me take that point away and see if there is more we can do to strengthen the data that's available. We have, of course, through a couple of channels, provided support to assist in this area through the general allocation to health boards around about mental health and psychological service support, and specifically through the Adult Autism Support Fund that we have in place. But I think I'd be the first to accept that the type of assistance that Mr Johnson is talking about is unlikely to be met by the size of the resources that are currently available. So I'll give him the assurance that we will explore these questions. I'm certain the Health Secretary will be happy to. I know he will have engaged with the Health Secretary on these points, because I know how much of a contribution Mr Johnson has made on this subject to parliamentary proceedings. And if there is more we can do to try to address those findings in the report, I give him my assurance that the Government will explore what is possible to be done.
Thank you. If many members wishing to put questions, and concise questions and responses will enable more members that opportunity, I call Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Following the recent publication of Dr Jim Swire's book on Lockerbie and its subsequent serialisation on television, and the resistance of the UK Government to release documents even after 30 years relating to the atrocity, and remaining concerns for some, including myself, about the credibility of the conviction of Abel Bassett al-Megrahi, would the First Minister support a UK inquiry?
First Minister.
President, first of all, let me express my sympathies to those who lost loved ones on board Pan Am Flight 103 and in the town of Lockerbie. I remember these events vividly, and they were terrifying for the community in Dumfries and Galloway and for all the families affected by this atrocity. Members will be aware that there is an ongoing criminal case currently underway in the American courts. I would prefer not to speculate on possible inquiries while these criminal investigations and judicial processes remain open. And of course, it is a matter of fact that the Lord Advocate has been very closely involved in the preparation for those criminal proceedings in the United States.
Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, the illegal release of 2 lynx south of Aviemore was spotted by local gamekeepers. Gamekeepers then worked with the police and the Royal Zoological Society to safely recapture these animals, and I'm pleased to say that they are now safely in care. Will the First Minister join with me, firstly, in condemning this illegal release, and secondly, to thank all those involved in the capture of the animals without harming them? And would he also ask the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs to meet with me to discuss the genuine concerns caused to my constituents over what was a very serious wildlife crime?
First Minister.
So let me agree with Mr Mountain on his comments in relation to the illegal release of these 2 lynx. That should not have happened. It is an illegal act, and I join him in condemning that act. I'm enormously grateful to everybody who has contributed towards the safe capture of the lynx, and they are now they've been captured by the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, one of the great and wonderful assets of our country, which is the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, but I'm aware that a number of other parties locally assisted in that process, including officers of Police Scotland and the gamekeepers locally. And lastly, I'm certain that the Rural Affairs Secretary will be happy to meet Mr Mountain to discuss this question.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. National Galleries of Scotland stated in committee evidence that lack of investment in their state is increasing the risk of catastrophic incident in their buildings to a critical level. The largest project to mitigate this risk, the artworks in Granton, North Edinburgh, has yet to get off the ground. Will the Scottish Government do all it can to expedite progress on artworks? And can the First Minister assure us no national galleries will close their doors?
First Minister.
I've just made reference in my previous answer to great assets of Scotland, and the National Galleries of Scotland are another of the great assets of Scotland, and we are determined to support the National Galleries. The government budget, of course, includes a record £34 million uplift for culture, a 9%, and National Galleries of Scotland received a 9% increase in their overall budget, 9%. So I hope that data reassures Mr Chowdhury of the importance the government attaches to nurturing and supporting our cultural assets. We are enormously fortunate as a country to have the National Galleries and the collection that they nurture on our behalf, and the government will engage constructively with National Galleries to ensure that they are well supported through the challenges that lie ahead. Of course, I do come back to my key point, which I made to Mr Chowdhury before the government's budget, or maybe it was around about the time the government's budget was set out, that we have to have votes to get the government's budget through. I promised Mr Chowdhury in that answer there'd be a big settlement for culture. I delivered on my word, and I think all Mr Chowdhury should now do is vote for the government's budget, and then we'll all be happy.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the launch of the public consultation on non-surgical cosmetic procedures, and I want to ensure that as many people as possible have the opportunity to respond. So will the First Minister join me in encouraging people to respond to the consultation, as their input will help shape the action that the Scottish Government takes to improve client safety in this growing industry?
First Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr McMillan for his question and pay tribute to the campaign work which he's undertaken on this issue for some time. The consultation to which he refers has been brought forward by the Minister for Public Health to develop proposals for robust and effective regulation, and the consultation closes on the 14th of February, and I would encourage anyone who wishes to express a view to contribute to the formulation of the approach on this question.
Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've been contacted by constituents concerned at reports that the National CJD Research and Surveillance Unit based in Edinburgh may close in March. This unit has done significant work for the last 34 years, including the identification of variant CJD in 1996. This is funded through the UK Government, and I've written to both the UK and the Scottish Health Secretaries about it. But can the First Minister comment on the potential closure of this unit, and also concerns that no guarantee has been given about the retention of data, samples and evidence that has been accumulated over decades? And does he agree it is absolutely vital that that is retained and made available for current and future research?
First Minister.
I'm not familiar with the point that Mr Ross makes to me, but the contents of what Mr Ross has put to me sound very significant to me. So allow me to take that issue away. I'll discuss this with the Health Secretary and explore the substantive points that Mr Ross puts to me, because I do understand the importance of particularly the data and the research being able to be supported. But I'll write to him with a substantive answer.
Gail Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the latest Bank of Scotland Business Barometer shows business confidence in Scotland rose 13% in December. Can the First Minister advise what assessment he's made of the findings, and can he outline how the budget will support business and thus help support this confidence to rise further?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, growing the economy is central to the delivery of all of our priorities, and particularly our agenda of eradicating child poverty and investing in our public services. And the Economy Secretary, Deputy First Minister and I are engaged actively in supporting investment. Indeed, yesterday the Net Zero Secretary and I were present at the announcement of an £800 million investment in battery storage activity in Scotland by Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. I think that's an indication of the openness for business that Scotland represents. The budget of itself includes investment through our excellent enterprise agencies of £321 million, of £200 million investment in the Scottish National Investment Bank, and a £15 million fund to help start-ups to grow. These are all more reasons why the budget should be supported, so that we can all contribute to supporting the growth and the development of the Scottish economy, because that will bring benefits to all of us.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a members' business debate in the name of Ash Regan, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the gallery to do so.